Waitress rushes to save a billionaire who collapsed. Later, he returns with a surprise. What if a single moment of kindness could change 2 lives forever? At Pete's Corner Diner on Maple Street, the morning rush buzzed with its usual energy. Coffee cups clinked, bacon sizzled, and conversations mixed into a comforting symphony that had played out the same way for decades. Behind the worn counter, 36-year-old Jessica wiped down tables with practiced efficiency, her movements graceful despite the exhaustion that shadowed her eyes. She'd been working double shifts for months, saving every penny she could for her mother's medical bills. The silver locket around her neck, her grandmother's final gift, caught the morning light as she moved between tables, serving coffee and smiles to regulars who'd become like family. But this Tuesday morning would be different from all the rest. Sometimes life has a way of placing ordinary people in extraordinary moments, testing the very core of who they are. Where are you watching from today? Jessica had always believed in treating everyone with dignity, no matter their station in life. It's something her grandmother taught her. Honey, you never know what battles someone's fighting behind their smile. At Pete's Diner, she'd seen truck drivers counting quarters for coffee, businessmen hiding tears behind newspapers, and elderly folks savoring their only meal out all week. Each person mattered, and Jessica made sure they felt it. The diner itself was nothing fancy. Red vinyl booths with small tiers mended with tape, a checkerboard floor that had seen better days, and walls decorated with faded photos of the neighborhood's history. But it was home to Jessica and the heart of the community. Old Pete had given her a chance when others wouldn't, and she'd never forgotten his kindness. That morning started like any other. Mrs. Patterson ordered her usual scrambled eggs, soft. The construction crew from the highway project grabbed their coffee to go, joking about their foreman's terrible singing voice. Jessica moved through her routine with genuine warmth, remembering how each customer liked their coffee, asking about grandchildren by name. Around 10:30, when the breakfast rush had settled into a gentle hum, a man in an expensive charcoal suit entered. He looked out of place among the work boots and baseball caps, but Jessica greeted him with the same smile she gave everyone else. He was maybe 42, with tired eyes that seemed to carry invisible weight. His hands shook slightly as he ordered black coffee, and Jessica noticed the expensive watch on his wrist, the kind that cost more than she made in a year. "First time here?" she asked gently, pouring his coffee into one of the diner's mismatched mugs. "Yeah," he replied, his voice strained. "Just needed somewhere quiet to think." Something in his tone made Jessica pause. She'd heard that same hollow note in her own voice during her mother's worst days. Without being intrusive, she made sure his coffee stayed warm, checking on him with subtle care. But 20 minutes later, as she balanced a tray of plates, she heard a crash from his booth. The man had collapsed, his body convulsing on the floor while other customers stood frozen in shock. In that split second, Jessica's world shifted into sharp focus. Every instinct told her to act. Jessica dropped her tray and rushed to the man's side, her nursing training from years ago flooding back. She'd started those classes before life forced her to choose between education and survival. Now, those half-finished lessons might save a life. "Someone call 911," she shouted, kneeling beside him as his body shook violently. The other customers backed away, unsure and frightened, but Jessica stayed calm. She turned him gently onto his side, protecting his airway while counting the seconds until the seizure subsided. Her grandmother's locket pressed against her chest as she leaned over him, whispering soothing words. "You're going to be okay," she murmured, checking his pulse with steady fingers. "I'm right here. You're safe." When the convulsions stopped, he remained unconscious, his breathing shallow. Jessica noticed a medical alert bracelet on his wrist. Diabetes. Her heart raced as she recognized the signs of severe hypoglycemia. Without hesitation, she grabbed packets of sugar from behind the counter, carefully placing small amounts under his tongue while monitoring his vital signs. The minutes stretched like hours until his eyes finally fluttered open, confusion clouding his features. "What happened?" he whispered, struggling to sit up. "Easy now," Jessica said softly, helping him lean against the booth. "You had a diabetic episode. The paramedics are on their way." He looked around the diner, taking in the concerned faces of strangers and Jessica's gentle presence. "You stayed with me," he said, wonder in his voice. It seemed like such a simple thing to him, but Jessica saw something deeper in his expression, surprise that someone cared enough to help without expecting anything in return. "Of course I did," she replied simply. "That's what neighbors do." The paramedics arrived and checked him over thoroughly. His blood sugar had stabilized, but they recommended a hospital visit. As they prepared to transport him, he reached for Jessica's hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Alexander Morrison, and I'll never forget what you did today." Jessica squeezed his hand gently. "I'm just glad you're okay, Alexander. Take care of yourself. If this moment of human kindness touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." As the ambulance pulled away, Jessica returned to cleaning up the broken plates, unaware that her simple act of compassion had just changed everything. She had no idea who Alexander Morrison really was, or how their paths would cross again in the most unexpected way. 3 weeks passed, and life at Pete's Diner returned to its familiar rhythm. Jessica continued working her double shifts, the weight of her mother's mounting medical bills growing heavier each day. The chemotherapy treatments were helping, but the cost was astronomical. Even with insurance, they were drowning in debt, and Jessica had started looking into second mortgage options just to stay afloat. She tried to stay positive, but late at night, when the diner was closed and she sat in her small apartment going over bills, the fear crept in. Her mother was everything to her, the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to raise Jessica alone, who'd taught her about dignity and kindness, who still apologized for being a burden despite Jessica's protests. One particularly difficult evening, Jessica sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of medical statements. The numbers didn't add up no matter how she arranged them. She touched her grandmother's locket, remembering the stories of resilience passed down through generations of strong women in her family. "We'll find a way. Mama," she whispered to herself, the words feeling hollow in the empty apartment. The next morning brought unexpected drama to the diner. A well-dressed woman in her 50s entered, looking around with obvious distaste at the modest surroundings. She approached Jessica with a cold expression that immediately put everyone on edge. "Are you the waitress who helped that man a few weeks ago?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. Jessica nodded cautiously. "Yes, ma'am." "Is everything all right?" "Hardly," the woman snapped. "That was my son, and your little publicity stunt has caused nothing but problems. People keep calling our office, reporters want interviews, and it's become a complete circus. We don't need some diner waitress making our private medical issues into a public spectacle." The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. Several regular customers overheard and stepped closer, their faces showing protective anger on Jessica's behalf. "Ma'am, I never spoke to any reporters," Jessica said quietly, her voice steady despite the hurt. "I just helped someone who needed it." "Well, stay away from my family," the woman warned before storming out, leaving the diner in shocked silence. Have you ever faced something like this? Being criticized for doing the right thing? Let us know in the comments. Old Pete patted Jessica's shoulder. "Don't let bitter people steal your good heart, honey," he said softly. But Jessica wondered if perhaps kindness really did come at too high a price. She had no idea that Alexander had been searching for her for weeks, fighting his own family to do something unprecedented. 2 days after the confrontation, Jessica was refilling the coffee station when a familiar figure walked through the diner's doors. Alexander Morrison looked healthier than before, his color good and his eyes bright. But what struck Jessica most was his determination. He walked straight to her with purpose. "Jessica," he said, and she was surprised he remembered her name. "We need to talk." She glanced around the busy diner. "I'm working, but please," he interrupted gently. "This is important. More important than you know." Something in his voice made her pause. She asked Pete to cover her section for a few minutes and sat down across from Alexander in the same booth where she'd first served him coffee. "First, I want to apologize for my mother," he began, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "She had no right to speak to you that way. What you did that day, It meant everything to me, and I've been trying to find you ever since." Jessica shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do." "But that's where you're wrong," Alexander said, his voice growing stronger. "Most people wouldn't have acted. They would have stepped back, waited for someone else to help. You didn't hesitate. You saved my life, and you asked for nothing in return." He paused, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I found out about your mother's medical bills." Jessica's face flushed. "How did you— When someone saves your life, you pay attention," he said simply. "I know you're struggling, and I know you'd never ask for help. But I can't live with myself knowing the person who gave me back my life is fighting a battle she shouldn't have to fight alone." He placed an envelope on the table between them. "This isn't charity, Jessica. It's gratitude. It's recognition that some people in this world still believe in doing right, and those people deserve to have someone believe in them too." Jessica stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. "I can't accept— My company employs thousands of people," Alexander said quietly. "We've made more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. But that day, lying on this floor, I realized that all of it meant nothing without human connection, without people who care enough to kneel down and help a stranger. If you've been enjoying this story of unexpected kindness, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales." Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she realized this moment would change everything, not just for her, but for both of them. Some gifts aren't just about money. They're about recognizing the value of a good heart. Jessica opened the envelope with trembling fingers, and inside found not just a check that would cover every penny of her mother's medical bills, but something even more precious, a handwritten letter and a business card. The letter read, "Dear Jessica, enclosed is payment for your mother's complete medical care, including experimental treatments not covered by insurance. But more than that, I'm offering you a position as Director of Community Outreach for Morrison Enterprises. Your salary will be enough to ensure your mother receives the best care available while you pursue the nursing degree you never got to finish. Your job will be to identify people and organizations in our community who embody the same spirit of kindness you showed me, because businesses should invest in people who make the world better, not just people who make them richer. You don't have to decide today, but know that you've already proven you're exactly the kind of person we need leading this initiative." Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she read the words. Alexander watched her quietly, understanding the magnitude of what this meant. Not just financial relief, but recognition, opportunity, and hope. "Why?" she whispered, looking up at him through her tears. Alexander smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes completely. "Because 3 weeks ago, I was ready to give up on everything. My diabetes had gotten worse, my family only saw me as a business asset, and I felt completely alone in the world. I came here to this diner planning to not be careful about my health anymore." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "But then I collapsed, and instead of stepping over me or looking away, you knelt down and stayed with me. You held my hand and told me I was going to be okay. For the first time in years, someone saw me as just a human being who needed help, not as a bank account or a business opportunity." Jessica reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, the same gesture that had comforted him weeks ago. "You gave me back my faith in people," Alexander continued, "and good people shouldn't struggle alone. My mother was wrong. This isn't about publicity or charity. This is about recognizing that the best investment any of us can make is in human kindness." 6 months later, Jessica's mother was in complete remission, and Jessica had finished her nursing degree while running one of the most successful community outreach programs in the state. She still wore her grandmother's locket every day, and she still stopped by Pete's Diner every week, not as an employee anymore, but as someone who understood that home isn't about where you came from, but about the connections you make along the way. Alexander became more than just someone she'd helped. He became a true friend who proved that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most beautiful changes. If you enjoyed this story about the power of human kindness, please remember to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us what really matters in life. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May you always remember that a single act of compassion can change the world.